We are starting a new sermon series this morning, and I'm very, very excited about it. This has been something that I've been looking forward to for the last several months. I love to go to the movies, but Kelly and I will tell you, as parents to 4 children under the age of 11, it's been 12 years since we've seen one that wasn't animated or involved talking animals. But that's okay. That's okay. Some of these films that we're going to be talking about over the next 5 weeks are some of our favorites. In many ways, each of us in our family have our own favorite Pixar films, and we tend to watch them over and over and over again. And so in many ways, some of the films that we're going to discuss are sort of the soundtrack of our lives, or at least in my home. A little bit about Pixar. Pixar is one of the largest, one of the leading animation studios and companies that exists in the world today. They were founded in 1986. They reside in Emeryville, not too far from here. They have produced, to date, 15 full-featured, regular, full-length movies, all of which have been critically and financially successful, except for one. Anybody know what the one was? Cars 2. It was horrible, but the rest of them have been absolutely fantastic, critically acclaimed, and also great financially success. Pixar, you may know, was purchased by Disney in 2006 for the very tidy sum of $7.4 billion. So they're doing okay these days. What you need to know about Pixar films is that they aren't just for kids. As I said earlier, they are some of the favorites in our household, but not just for the kids themselves. But they are movies and that tell themes that tend to resonate with adults just as much as kids. It's not just the attention-grabbing animation that attracts us, but more importantly, I would suggest it's the stories that they tell. It's the characters that we just resonate with, and they contain a reality, even if it's a talking car or a talking rat. But somehow they have this ability for us to be able to empathize and sympathize with them, and we can relate to them. And in many ways, these characters help us develop our character. They help us build our character. But they do so in a way that doesn't preach. Pixar is not an ultra-religious fundamentalist. They're not religious in any way, shape, or form, but I would suggest it's much more subversive, much more quiet. They don't preach, but allow the line between the sacred and the secular to be blurred just a little bit. The other thing about Pixar is that in the midst of a very dark and negative world, they oftentimes tell stories and create movies and films that have a sense of hope, an imagination of beauty and innocence and purity that is so desperately wanted and needed in a world such as ours. I would also suggest that they tell good stories. More than anything else, Pixar movies just simply tell good stories. Stories that engage the heart and the soul and the mind in the same way that Jesus, too, told good stories. Jesus rarely preached at people or gave them long, dry lectures on why it's important to live ethical, moral lives. Instead, he would simply gather together a bunch of people and tell them a story. A parable that would draw us in. And they would stick with them, and even now, 2,000 years later, those stories still stick with us. We remember and associate and live into the story of the Good Samaritan or the prodigal son. Not because it's got a good ethical teaching to it, but because it grabs us at a very deep and meaningful level. And I would suggest that Pixar films do, in many ways, the exact same thing. The text that we're going to hear in just a minute is from Psalm 139. One of the great psalms of the church. One of the things that it has this ability. It has this ability. Well, for one thing, one of the commentaries said this: it is one of the Bible's most literary and theological treasures. This psalm that Janet's about to read was read at my ordination service just a couple of years ago, and has the ability to speak to us in a very profound way. It creates what you're about to hear is the psalmist creating this understanding that we are all created in the image of God. That it creates this image of God as this potter or knitter or artist that creates within each of us in some sort of divine workshop this person, this child of God that is then placed into the womb of our mothers. As the psalmist will say, we are all wonderfully, fearfully made.
139, 13 through 16. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my uniformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed.
What's the toughest thing about being a superhero? Trying to live a normal life. Whether it's pumping up.
I got it!
Dinner with the family.
Stop running in the house! Hey, no force field! You sit down! You sit down! Let go of your brother!
Or seeing old friends.
Hey, Lucius!
Hey, Speedo! Aha!
You are one distracted guy. I know you miss being a hero and your job is frustrating. I just want you to know how much it means to me that you stay at it anyway.
Honey,
Hello, Mr. Incredible.
about the job,
We know who you are.
something's happened.
We have a new assignment for you.
What?
Showtime.
The supers aren't gone. You can still do great things.
Leave the saving the world to the men?
Honey, where's my super suit?
Why do you need to know?
I don't think so.
Your suit can stretch as far as you can and still retain its shape. Virtually indestructible. Machine washable, darling. That's a new feature.
We're superheroes. What can happen?
On my back!
Is anybody else craving popcorn? We need popcorn, don't we? We need popcorn. That would have been a nice touch. Hope you had a chance to watch this last week, The Incredibles. If not, a real brief recap of the story. A story which, by the way, interestingly enough, won the Academy Award in 2004 for the Best Animated Full-Length Feature in 2004. Mr. Incredible is a guy by the name of Bob Parr. And he, along with his wife, Helen, are a duo, I guess you could say. He is Mr. Incredible, she is Elastigirl, and they are superheroes. Some of the greatest crime-fighting superheroes that existed in the world at that time, one of many. But something happens, and the government comes in and explains that they are not allowed to continue in their superhero ways. We've become a litigious society and culture, and the government keeps getting sued. There's chaos ensues, and so they are forced into hiding as part of some superhero relocation service that takes place. And these two, along with all of the other superheroes that are alive and well at that time, are forced into hiding, and they are told not to use their superpowers, not allowed to even tell anybody that they are indeed superheroes. And so they're forced into hiding to regain this normal life despite having these superpowers. The problem, of course, is that Bob is miserable. He's miserable. He's stuck in this dead-end job as an insurance salesman that literally is sucking the life right out of him. And he's forced to give up these gifts that have been entrusted to him, to pretend that he's somebody that he's not. In many ways, there is a question that sort of drives the entire film. And the question is quite a simple one. The question is simple: who am I? Who am I? As superheroes, we can understand that that would be an important question that all of us would ask. Am I the hero, or am I the mild-mannered alter ego? What happens when I can no longer use my superhero powers? And what are the implications that has, not just for my family and for those around me, but for all of the other people in the world that don't have superhero powers? In many ways, you could say that the question that drives the film, the major theme that moves the movie along, is the issue of identity. Talking about who we are. Identity is significant. It's one of the most important, significant things, psychologists will tell you, for us to be able to be whole human beings. We have to have some sort of an understanding of who we are. What we do and who we are shapes us in a very real and profound way, and it's critical for us to have some sort of basic understanding of who we are. And without that understanding of who we are and what drives us, who we are as children of God, without that, we tend to wander around through life. We find ourselves uncertain. Knowing the truth is critical. Incredibly important, psychologists will tell us over and over and over again. And if we are unable to establish some sort of an identity, to come to grips with who we are, the very core of our being, the very depths of our soul, we live a life that is filled with confusion and oftentimes deep, deep unhappiness. Helen, the mom, Elastigirl, is having a conversation with one of her daughters, her only daughter, who herself has superhero powers but is unable to use those. They're having a conversation, and she says to her at one point, "Your identity is your most valuable possession. Protect it. Protect your identity." Now, the question of who I am, my simple identity, is both simple but also incredibly complex. It's not just the question itself, who I am, is a relatively simple question. But it's important for us to remember that oftentimes the answers that come about when we ask that question about who we all are, not quite so simple. They have a lot to do with all sorts of different influences. Our family of origin, our family of choice, our ethnicity, our cultural environment in which we were raised, the vocation to which we are called, our moral choices that we make in life, and of course, who we are is deeply impacted by our religious tradition, our faith. You could say that in many ways, the question of identity is what the psalmist is wrestling with in Psalm 139. He has some sort of an understanding that he is a child of God, that he has been created unique, and that he is loved. He says at one point, the psalmist says, "For it was you, God, who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb, and I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." Here's Mr. Incredible in film. And he understands the very depth of his being, who he is, and the gifts to which he has been given. He's got superhero strength, right? He has the ability, not just the ability, but the desire to make a difference in the world, to utilize these gifts that have been given to him to make a difference and to make the world a better place, to fight crime and make sure the good guys always win. But the problem happens when he is forced to no longer live into that identity. He is forced to deny that part of who he is. He is told that these gifts that you have been given, just pretend that those don't exist. In many ways, you could say it this way: he's forced to live an inauthentic life. He's forced to live an inauthentic life. I have been thinking a lot lately about the damage that is done when people are forced to live inauthentic lives. I was thinking this last week in part, oftentimes how all too often the church, the Big C church, has forced people to live inauthentic lives. Most importantly, most significantly, the LGBT community, gay and lesbian people, who have been told time and time again, we understand that you have been created in the image of God, but not that part of you. That part of you is bad and it needs to be changed. We understand that you're created in the image of God, but we don't like that part, and so we want you to ignore that part and to be something different that you aren't. And the damage that is done when people of faith say, on the one hand, yes, you are created in the image of God, but on the other hand, just deny that part of who you are. The damage that is done, especially to our young people who are wrestling with issues of identity and sexuality, and all that is tied up together, the damage that is done is profound. Some statistics for you. LGBT young people are 2.5 times more likely to contemplate suicide than their straight counterparts. But even more frighteningly so, LGBT youth are 8 times more likely to attempt suicide. What would the world be like? What would our culture be like if there were more churches like ours that stand beside people, young people, and say to them simply, you are a child of God, and that we love you as you are, gay or straight, short or tall, however you have been created in the image of God, you are loved. How might the world be different if we were able to do that? But instead, what happens is that LGBT young people are bullied and face rejection and isolation over and over and over again. Of course, it's not just LGBT folks that are forced to live in authentic lives. There are others of us that have done so or currently are doing so. Forced to live lives that aren't necessarily who God intended for us to live. And we know what that's like. What about you? Have you ever felt in your life, lived in such a way, or in such a way that you felt as if you had to be something or do something different than who you are? Maybe you were told at a very young age that your body, you would be loved more if your body looked different than it does now. Or if this part of your personality, if you could just change that, you would be loved at a deeper level. What does that look like in your life? Henry David Thoreau, the great poet and author, an abolitionist, once said, most people live lives of quiet desperation, and they go to the grave with a song still in them. Live lives of quiet desperation. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Bob Parr is living this life of quiet desperation. He's at work, this job that, as I said earlier, is just slowly sucking the soul right out of him. And he's miserable. He's miserable because he's not able to be the person that God created him to be. And he reaches the point where he can't take it.
Request claim on claim numbers 158, 183. You will be...
Got him yet? Then where is he?
Mr. Huff would like to talk to you in his office.
Now?
Sit down, Bob. I'm not happy, Bob. Not happy. Ask me why.
Okay. Why?
Why what? Be specific, Bob.
Why are you unhappy?
Your customers make me unhappy.
What? You've gotten complaints?
Complaints I can handle. What I can't handle is your customers' inexplicable knowledge of Insuracare's inner workings. They're experts! Experts, Bob! Exploiting every loophole, dodging every obstacle! They're penetrating the bureaucracy!
Did I do something illegal?
No.
Are you saying we shouldn't help our customers?
The law requires that I answer no.
We're supposed to help people.
We're supposed to help our people! Starting with our stockholders, Bob! Who's helping them out, huh? You know, Bob, a company
It's like an enormous clock.
is like an enormous Yes, precisely. It only works if all the little cogs mesh together. Now, a clock needs to be clean, well lubricated, and wound tight. The best clocks have jewel movements, cogs that fit, that cooperate by design. I'm being metaphorical, Bob. You know what I mean by cooperative cogs? Bob? Bob? Look at me when I'm talking to you, Parr!
That man out there, he needs help.
Do not change the subject, Bob. We're discussing your attitude.
He is getting mugged.
Well, let's hope we don't cover him.
I'll be right back.
Stop right now, or you're fired! Close the door. Get over here now. I'm not happy, Bob. Not happy.
He got away.
Good thing, too. You were this close to losing your...
William Willimon, up until recently, was the chaplain at Duke University. And he tells a story about one of his students. A student that was a bright, beautiful young student. She was a double major of finance and business. And she was being groomed by her family, who also went to Duke, to take over the family investment business. She was making good grades. Things were going well. The only part is that that's not who she was. That's not what she wanted to do. And she was miserable. Between her junior and senior years in college, she decided to go with the college campus ministry group on a mission trip. And while she was there, she tapped into that sense of who she was, of what God was calling her to do and to be. And she came back transformed. She came back with a sense of clarity and conviction. And she decided to drop out of college for a while. And she now serves as a teacher on a Native American reservation in Arizona. And she would tell you that she is happy and whole and content. But the problem is that her family has disowned her. No longer speaks with her. But yet she lives with conviction. She lives with a sense that this is who she is, that this is what God has been given her to do. As a result of that, she has a wholeness. Mr. Incredible is in the same way. Not long after the scene that you just saw, he is called into this top secret mission. And all of a sudden he is forced subtly underground to regain his superhero ways. And once he starts living into those and acting on those gifts that have been entrusted to him, all of a sudden his whole life changes. It's almost as if he's been reborn. And his life takes on this sense of clarity and conviction of all of a sudden he's more kind, he's more compassionate, he's more creative, he's more alive than he's been in years. He becomes not just a superhero, but he becomes a better father, and he becomes a better husband. In part because he is being his true, authentic self, who God created him to be. A number of years ago, I read a book called Let Your Life Speak by Parker Palmer, and it had significant impact on my life. It's one that I've read a number of times and try to get to at least once a year. In chapter 2, he says this. He says, our deepest calling is to grow into our own authentic selfhood, whether or not it conforms to some image of who we ought to be. When we do so, we will not only find the joy that every human being seeks, but we will also find our path of authentic service to the world. When we live into that sense of authentic selfhood, by the end of the movie, all the incredible family is living into using their superhero gifts that have been entrusted to us. They are saving the world. Bob Parr is able to use his superhuman strength again. Helen, Elastigirl, is able to be flexible and stretch and take on any type of shape that she would need in that situation. Their daughter, their oldest daughter, Violet, is able to be invisible. Which teenage girl does not want to be invisible at some point in their life, right? And not only that, but she's able to create these force fields that protect herself and her family and those that she loves. And Dash, the little boy, he's able to run at high speeds. They even let him join the track team, which is pretty helpful for a kid with superhuman strength and speed. And then their little baby Jack discovers his own superpower, which you got to see to be able to believe or even explain. By the end of the movie, they are regaining the sense of identity. They know who they are, and they are able to live in such a way that is authentic and real. And what they come to tell us is that there really is no problem being super. What about you? What about you? What's your superpower? Or maybe a way to say that is, what is the gift that God has entrusted to us? What are the gifts that God has instilled within you? When God created you, knitted you into your mother's womb. What is living inside of you that is dying desperately to be birthed, to be given into this world? What is it you need to give to this world? What is your authentic self? You see, the truth is, whether we like it or not, all of us at some point in our life, we're going to face struggles, we're going to face villains that are going to try and knock us down. But I would argue that the greatest danger that any of us will ever face in our life will to not be the people that God created us to be. The greatest danger that any of us will ever face in life, the greatest risk that any of us will ever face, is to not be the person that God created us to be. There really is no problem being super, because all of us are super. All of us are loved and adored by God. All of us have been created in the image of God. All of us have been given gifts and are invited to give these gifts away to the world. May we live in such a way that we are free to be who we are. Loved, adored by God, created within us gifts that God invites us to bring into the world. May we be so free to live in such a world. We pray with you, please. Eternal loving God, we give thanks for the way that you have wonderfully and fearfully made each and every one of us. For the gifts that you have entrusted to us that are not ours to keep, but to give away. For the way in which you call us to make a difference in this world by being who you created us to be. Give us the courage, O God, to be authentic, to be our true selves, to live in such a way that would give you glory and honor and praise. We pray this in the name of your Son. He taught us what it means to live.